The Three Little Men in the Wood. In a village there lived a man and his daughter. The man's wife had passed away, leaving him with their beloved child. Not far away, there was a woman whose husband had also died, and she had a daughter of her own. The two girls knew each other well and would sometimes play together at the woman's house. One day, the woman said to the man's daughter, "Tell your father that I wish to marry him. If he agrees, you shall have milk to wash in every morning and wine to drink." The girl went home and relayed the message to her father. The man was unsure of what to do. Marriage, he thought, could bring both joy and torment. To help him decide, he devised a test. He took off his boot, which had a hole in its sole, and told his daughter, "Take this boot to the loft, hang it on the big nail, and pour water into it. If the boot holds the water, I will marry the woman. If it leaks, I will not." The girl followed his instructions, and to their surprise, the boot held the water without a drop spilling out. Convinced by the test, the man married the woman. The next morning, the man's daughter found milk and wine by her bedside. On the third day, the man's daughter had water, but the woman's daughter found milk and wine. This pattern continued, with the woman treating her stepdaughter harshly out of jealousy for her beauty and kindness. One winter's day, when the ground was frozen and the snow covered everything, the woman made a frock out of paper and told her stepdaughter, "Put on this frock and go into the wood to fetch me a basket of strawberries. I have a great craving for them." The girl objected, knowing strawberries could not be found in winter and that the paper frock would offer no protection from the cold. Disregarding her protests, the woman insisted, giving her only a piece of hard bread for the journey. Reluctantly, the girl put on the paper frock and went into the wood. As she walked, she stumbled upon a little house where three small men lived. They welcomed her kindly and shared her bread. Impressed by her kindness, the men decided to grant her 3 wishes. For her first wish, she asked for strawberries, and to her surprise, she found ripe strawberries growing nearby. Delighted, she filled her basket and returned home. As she entered the house, a piece of gold fell from her mouth with each word she spoke, a result of the little men's second wish. She recounted her adventure to her stepmother and stepsister, and as she did, gold pieces scattered around the room. Envious of her good fortune, the stepsister demanded to go into the wood as well. Reluctantly, the stepmother agreed, dressing her daughter in a fur coat and providing her with food. However, the stepsister's attitude was rude and unkind to the little men, and they decided to punish her. They decreed that she would grow uglier every day, that a toad would jump out of her mouth with each word, and that she would die a miserable death. When the stepsister returned home, a toad indeed sprang from her mouth at every word, causing disgust to all around her. The stepmother became more and more set against the man's daughter, whose beauty increased day by day, and her only thought was how to do her some injury. So at last she took a kettle, set it on the fire, and scalded some yarn in it. When it was ready, she hung it over the poor girl's shoulder and gave her an axe, and she was to go to the frozen river and break a hole in the ice, and there to rinse the yarn. She obeyed, and went and cut a hole in the ice, and as she was about it there came by a magnificent carriage, in which the king sat. The carriage stood still, and the king said, "My child, who are you, and what are you doing there?" She answered, "I am a poor girl, and am rinsing yarn." Then the king felt pity for her, and as he saw that she was very beautiful, he said, "Will you go with me?" "Oh yes, with all my heart," answered she, and she felt very glad to be out of the way of her mother and sister. So she stepped into the carriage and went off with the king, and when they reached his castle the wedding was celebrated with great splendor, as the little men in the wood had foretold. At the end of a year the young queen had a son, and as the stepmother had heard of her great good fortune she came with her daughter to the castle, as if merely to pay the king and queen a visit. One day, when the king had gone out, and when nobody was about, the bad woman took the queen by the head, and her daughter took her by the heels, and dragged her out of bed, and threw her out of the window into a stream that flowed beneath it. Then the old woman put her ugly daughter in the bed, and covered her up to her chin. When the king came back and wanted to talk to his wife a little, the old woman cried, "Stop, stop! She is sleeping nicely. She must be kept quiet today." And came again the next morning, and as he spoke to his wife, and she answered him, there jumped each time out of her mouth a toad instead of the piece of gold as heretofore. Then he asked why that should be, and the old woman said it was because of her great weakness, and that it would pass away. But at night a boy in the kitchen saw a duck-like creature swimming up the gutter and speaking to the king, asking about the guests and the baby. The creature then transformed into the queen, took care of the child, and requested to be struck 3 times with a sword. The king complied, and the queen was restored to her former self. The man's daughter, now the queen, lived happily ever after with her husband and child, while the little house in the wood remained a sanctuary for those in need.